As I broadened my knowledge about substance use and declining mental health, I realized that this is a national problem. It's not just Indiana, it's not just Brown County. Based on a social media post that I had made, a woman by the name of Amy Pozak called me and said, "Do you believe there are stories to tell?" And I said, "Yes, I think there are," because I had begun serving women in our incarceration center, correctional center, and I started hearing their stories, Chris, and I realized very quickly, in a very profound moment on a Sunday, that had I made one decision to try today's drugs in a vulnerable or dark moment in my own life, I could be sitting in green and white stripes. These women had careers, dreams, families, homes, and they got tangled. They got caught in the web of the addictive properties of today's drugs.
Welcome to In Brown County, your front porch to the people, places, and stories that make Brown County, Indiana, one of a kind. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, and every week, we bring you conversations with local voices, behind-the-scenes looks at events, and the best of small-town life. Whether you're a longtime local or a weekend wanderer, there's something here for you. Let's get into it. Today on In Brown County, we are joined by Lisa Hall, and we're going to talk about a film that she's made and kind of a whole documentary series. And it's going to be a little bit of a heavier topic than what we normally talk about, but a really good film, a really good documentary, and something that's really helping to highlight some of the things going on in our community. As I mentioned, this is Lisa Hall. She is the executive producer and award-winning first-time filmmaker of The Addict's Wake, which is the film we will be discussing. And there's going to be a screening here of the law enforcement part of the documentary series on November 16th. So Lisa, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Chris. I love being in our iconic, beautiful Brown County Playhouse.
Isn't this great?
Yeah,
and I think
I love this playhouse.
The Music Center gets a lot of press as the venue in town, and it is a great venue.
It is.
But the Playhouse has been here I don't know how long, and is also another phenomenal venue for everything from plays to live music to films.
Yes, absolutely. And this is where we'll have the screening. So I'm excited to be doing this interview with you from here today.
Absolutely. So let's start. Before we get into the film, I want to know a little bit about your personal story. Because everybody, it seems like when we get together in Brown County, the first question everyone asks is, well, why are you here? How'd you end up here? So along those lines, how did you end up in Brown County?
How did I end up here? Well, my husband and I and sons bought a cabin on Morrison Road in 2008. And we had given that a lot of consideration and a lot of thought, and it happened for us. And I loved it because we didn't have Wi-Fi. We never had a TV in that cabin. It was both of my boys played baseball, and so it was our bullpen. It was our place to come and warm up for the rest of life. And I'd get to that cabin, and I just loved it so much, and I'd be cooking big pots of chili or spaghetti, have lots of teenage boys playing football in the yard or riding dirt bikes or shooting soft air guns. And so that's how our Brown County journey started. And then when our nest emptied, there was a piece of property that was for sale that we had always admired, and it just worked out. I felt like it was time to have a new adventure and time for a change, and we left our home of 25 years in Indianapolis and moved here.
Well, fantastic. And now, one thing that's interesting, because I looked you up on LinkedIn, and nothing there really says filmmaking, right? So if I'm not mistaken, you were in corporate marketing, you were in fundraising, working with nonprofits. Filmmaking is not any of those things. So what took you from being a marketing person to a filmmaker?
Just the opportunity came about based on a social media post that I had made. And when we moved here, I loved everything that we all love about Brown County, but what I did not know was how sick and addicted our underbelly was. And not just here in Brown County, throughout the state, throughout our nation. As I broadened my knowledge about substance use and declining mental health, I realized that this is a national problem. It's not just Indiana, it's not just Brown County. Based on a social media post that I had made, a woman by the name of Amy Pozak called me and said, "Do you believe believe there are stories to tell? And I said, yes, I think there are, because I had begun serving women in our incarceration center, correctional center, and I started hearing their stories, Chris. And I realized very quickly, in a very profound moment on a Sunday, that had I made one decision to try today's drugs in a vulnerable or dark moment in my own life, I could be sitting in green and white stripes. These women had careers, dreams, families, homes, and they got tangled. They got caught in the web of the addictive properties of today's drugs.
Now, that's a big task in and of itself. But B, then you say, okay, I want to tackle this really heavy, really deep emotional topic. Yeah. So where did you find the encouragement, the strength to be able to do that? Because that's two very hard things to tackle both at once, being new to kind of all of it.
Yeah. Well, yes. I never dreamed of being a filmmaker. Making a film was not on my bucket list. When the opportunity came, and my husband and I were talking about it at the Hobnob over dinner one night, he said, well, you need to call my Uncle Don. And I said, why would I call your Uncle Don? He said, don't you remember in 2008, Uncle Don had made a movie, been an executive producer, found the money for the movie Taxi to the Dark Side. And it won an Academy Award in the documentary category. And so I called Don, and what this film was about was they had waterboarded a would-be terrorist to death at Guantanamo Bay. And it turns out he was a taxi driver. He wasn't a terrorist. And so there was a lot of outcry from humanity, outcry for the way this man was treated and the way he passed. And it changed how we treat prisoners in detainment at Guantanamo. And I thought, wow, if I could be a part of something that could impact a situation that our community was facing for the good, it could change the trajectory of the outcome of pandemic drug use, then I wanted to be a part of that. So that's why film. And film has such a spectacular, magical way of allowing people to step in the shoes of another person. And it's in the way no other medium does. You can read stories, you can audio hear stories, but when you watch and you hear stories, you just have a way of breeding empathy when it's necessary. And I felt like, based on my research of this issue, there was not a lot of empathy for people who were caught up in drug addiction. And I wanted to change that conversation. I wanted to breed empathy and compassion. And I wanted to address this shame and stigma that so many people face. And so that's why I said yes to a film. Secondly, for almost everything I've done in the last 30 years, I've been raising money for something, whether it was for a travel baseball team or a mission trip, or it didn't matter. For my kids' school, I ran the PTF for 4 years. I was president of the Booster Club for 2 years. So raising money, I'm not daunted by. And I just needed someone to tell me what the budget needed to be. And it took 2.5 years to fund this film, because sometimes it was $10 at a time. And those gifts were very precious to me, as much as the $25,000 matching grant. They all counted towards the end goal. And so I could be patient in that process, because I had been doing that for the last 25 years.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think it's amazing, because I know some people that are film producers and whatnot, the amount of time and money it takes. You watch a 90-minute film and you think, well, that's not that long and hard of a process. No, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars and years just to get a good 1-hour film together.
We had over 100 hours of footage, and my director, Michael Hussein, is a great storyteller, and we weren't sure what that story was going to be in the end, but as we started looking at footage, it became kind of clear how we were going to weave it together. And this town was doing something extraordinary that other communities weren't doing. Through Corey and Michelle Joy, they had already founded Do Something after they lost their son Caleb in 2017 to an overdose. And so this community was kind of ahead of other communities. They founded the event Hope Fest, which was to raise awareness for the issue. This county had suffered so much loss, and when you are a 15,000 person county, losing 17 young adults in a short amount of time is very felt. And so this county was ready to heal and to get better. And so it was scary because I was kind of a new girl in town at that point. And here I am going to make a documentary about our dirty laundry, right? And I thought there would be more pushback, but there really wasn't, and not to my face anyway. I found that this county they were ready to heal and to address this issue, and they weren't putting their head in the sand. And as I've been in counties throughout the state and outside the state of Indiana, that's not always the case.
So in that way, I guess Brown County provided a unique place kind of to even get this information and to kind of be able to tell the story more deeply. As you were going through the process, because I feel like if I say Brown County to someone from Indianapolis, it is the wonderful little shops, it is the cute little restaurants, the woods, the leaves, all of that. But no one really who comes here to visit thinks about all the normal life that happens here.
Yes.
Right? Because
yes.
it almost seems like normal life isn't a consideration in how people view where we are. But you're telling not only just the story of normal life, you're telling the story of what is below that, the underlying issues. And so how did you find just kind of getting to get the footage and finding these stories and finding the people to talk to?
Well, unfortunately, there's no shortage of stories in this community, and that was the unfortunate part. Fortunate for me, though, we would go and I would walk into town hall and people knew that it was me telling these stories, and they say, "Hey, have you heard of such and such?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." And they're like, "Well, you need to call because he's got a great story." So I would just be doing my normal life, and then I would get referred all the time. And I think we only had one couple who said no to us because I think their son was still in active addiction and they weren't ready to be that vulnerable. But otherwise, everybody, and I'm talking people who had fresh loss of a child, they were willing to talk to us. And because a couple of things, they wanted to prevent that from happening to another family. But two, Michael and I told people that we made a promise to steward their stories well, and we would take care of those stories. And that's why I haven't gone to Netflix. That's why I haven't reached out. Everybody's like, "Well, why don't you go, to Hulu or Netflix or, Amazon Prime?" And it's because I promised people we would steward their stories. And I'm not going to turn those stories over in a scenario where they could be re-edited or made to look like something it wasn't. I'm not willing to do that. And so a lot of referrals as I would finish one interview and they'd say to me, "Hey, you should also go talk to this family because this is their story." And like I said, we had 100 hours of footage. There was a lot on the cutting room floor by the time we were done. I had to tell the drug czar of the state of Indiana that he wasn't in the original film because we had filmed him. And when we got accepted into Heartland and we were going to premiere there, the Heartland Film Festival, they called me. His people called me and said that he would like tickets, and I said, "Fine, I'll make sure he has them at will call. But we need to tell him that he didn't make the cut." And that was one of the hardest things I had to do because now we used him in our educational film, but he didn't make the first film, and that was kind of hard.
Well, and speaking of kind of the different films that are in this series.
Yes.
So walk us through that, because if I'm not mistaken, there are 3 or 4 different ones at this point. And then the law enforcement one, which you're doing on the 16th, that'll be the premiere for that piece.
It won't be the premiere, but it'll be the first time this county will have had a chance to see it.
County.
It'll be a Brown County premiere for sure. So when you don't have credibility as a filmmaker, which I did not, let's be clear, I had to go enter a handful of festivals because you need those laurels for people to pay attention to you. Yeah. But I never wanted to make a film that was about being recognized at film festivals or go to Hollywood. That's not what I had dreamed up. The dream for this film, that it would be a tool for communities to use to really open that conversation to a hard topic. We know that when we shine light on an issue, that's when the healing can begin for communities, and that's what I wanted the film to do. So in doing so, over 60 counties in the state of Indiana. I'm headed to Lafayette tomorrow. There was an outcry. Even at Heartland International Film Festival, someone stood up and said, "Could you make a film on this topic for schools?" So first right out of the gate, we had that question, and then it didn't matter wherever we went. We had that outcry for an educational version. So we had one criticism about the original film, and that's that we did not show enough diversity. And you can't fake what you don't have. And I wanted that story to be authentic, and people know when it's not. And so we kept one rural story in for the educational film, and then went inner city, Indianapolis, to get Tasha's brave and incredible story. We went on the west side of Indy to feature Hope Academy, which is Indiana's recovery high school. They take kids from all over the state and out of state. And there are only 43 or 4 recovery high schools in this nation, and 7 that are accredited. And ours is one of the 7. And I really wanted to showcase that, because that's Indiana doing good things on this issue of substance use. And then we had a Carmel story, so we had a very suburban lens, and just to show that it doesn't discriminate. So that is filmed very differently, 9 5-minute-ish segments for a totality of about 46 minutes. And you can watch a segment at a time, or you can teach 2 or 3 at a time. And then we created a learning guide, which took me as long as to make the film, the learning guide did. And it was important. I didn't want it to just be fluff. I wanted someone who doesn't live in that mental health and addiction space to be able to show that film and then feel confident to have discussion afterwards. So we handhold somebody through that film with the learning guide. So that was our educational film, and we launched that in 24. And then this last year, to that same outcry, was one for law enforcement first responders. And really anybody on the judicial side of things, that's the lens they're looking at this. And people don't know what this issue has done from a mental health standpoint for our law enforcement and first responders. They are making 6 to 12 overdose runs a day. There are small children in the home when parents have overdosed or fatally in too many cases. And these folks do and see a lot of hard things. Secondly, when someone is incarcerated for this issue, that's their first stop in sobriety. It's their first stop in the journey to sobriety. Why wouldn't we want to do as much as we could for people where that is their issue? So we showcase agencies where they're allowing problem-solving courts, drug courts, different kind of non-traditional programming in, peer-to-peer counseling and coaching, inside of the jail. And it's working. We feature Hancock County, who's reduced recidivism by 80% because of this non-traditional programming. And he allows it all to come in, faith-based, the peer-to-peer, they do moral recognition program. And not only are people doing well in their time of incarceration, but they're coming out more stabilized. When we started filming, the MO would be you get released, the only number you know is to your drug dealer. And so the cycle would just start all over again until they got arrested and they were back in jail. And we're trying to break that cycle. And this film serves as one, here's what three counties are doing differently from that lens standpoint, and what could you do based on the resources you have in your county to start doing different kinds of things. And that film is as important to me as any of them because of what those folks do daily and what they see and how hard it is on them.
Well, it sounds like whether we're talking about the original film, the educational version, the law enforcement one, throughout all these, the thread I'm hearing is that there's a need on your end to come up with something actionable at the end of it, right? That it's not just here's this tragic thing, it sucks, sorry, move on.
Yes.
It's here's this tragic thing, and here's what we can do as a community, here's what's working, here's how we can make this situation better.
Yes, you are so astute, Chris. I mean, there are actionable steps for every film. And the educational film in itself is more preventative, but we give so many pages in that guide to here's what you do afterwards. Here are resources. Here are activities that you can do if you find one of your students coming from this kind of situation. So you're absolutely right for that original film. And those goals stayed true in each version, each film, regardless of which one it is. And that's one, to create a broader swath of emotional awareness, because it's come home to all of us. And I have a sheriff who says that in the law enforcement film, so that's not my original thought, but he says two things that are so important. You can arrest the addiction out of someone, and two, addiction has come home to us all. And it has, and so it's no longer us, them, we, they. It is our community. And so that emotional awareness is critical. Reducing shame and stigma is critical. When we started, I saw so much silo effect with this issue, and so I wanted these films to debunk that silo mentality. And these films are really a clarion call to say, we have to link arms, share resources, know what the other one is doing, so as communities, we can successfully fight back against substance use and declining mental health. And then lastly, it's been important to me all along to showcase hope. And the reason why is so many people hear about the ones who don't make it, but they don't get to see that recovery does happen. Recovery is possible for everyone. And not only is it possible, but our people that are doing well in recovery are leading vibrant lives. Many of them are getting certified as peer-to-peer counseling and coaching. They're working for agencies and organizations because they're so grateful for their recovery. They want to give back.
Well, I think that's wonderful because it just popped into my head as you were saying that. Good stories don't make the news, right? I mean, the tragedies make the news, and that's what you see when you turn on the news every day. But the stories where people actually turn their lives around, they're actually recovering, those rarely, if ever, make the news.
Yeah, that's so true. That's absolutely true. And that even makes that last point that much more critical.
Absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about as I was looking at the film and kind of going through different interviews and things you've done, you talk about moving the barometer of stigma and shame. And I just loved that phrase. So, A, kind of fill everybody in on what is the barometer of stigma and shame, and then B, how do we actually move it?
Well, we show a film and we talk about it. We bring it out into the open. And I think what Corey Joy talks about in the film, because Corey's a pastor, Michelle's a fourth grade teacher, they experienced a loss of their oldest son to an overdose. And I think, they're coming out and being willing to just share their vulnerability in that loss. That's how we break down walls of shame and stigma, because it's those two things, the shame. So when you're guilty, it's like I've done something bad, but when you feel ashamed, it's saying I am bad. And these people are not bad. They've gotten trapped in very highly addictive drugs for, no one sets out to say, gosh, I hope I'm trapped in addiction when I grow up. I want to be an addict. That's not how people start. And so naively or not, they don't know that's going to happen to them. And so we want to remove all the barriers that are preventing people from seeking help. And the shame of saying, my family's in trouble, it's huge. It's huge. And the stigma attached to someone who's in addiction, you're a junkie, you hear all those words, and we're trying to change the language in the industry for they're not an addict, they are suffering from substance use disorder or substance abuse. And so the industry is really trying to crack down on that kind of labeling language that prevents people from seeking the help they need. And that's what we have to do. We have to be able to talk about it, and we have to humanize this issue and really walk alongside of people that are struggling who deserve to be helped.
Absolutely. And I think that subtle shift of words, which so many people just go, oh, well, that's just silly, or that actually makes a difference.
Yes.
And when you, because it makes you recognize people as people. It stops putting that label there, and now you have to deal with a person, not a label. Now, kind of building off of that, because obviously you've been around probably a lot more people that have dealt with addiction, that are telling you stories a lot more openly than most of us ever will. Is there anything in particular you think that people don't understand about addiction, or where most people get it wrong?
Well, I made a presentation to a Rotary Club, and afterwards I had some older folks come up and say, well, just tell them to quit. Why don't they just stop? And I think what people don't understand with addiction, and we try to explain this in the various films, is that there is a shift in the brain in terms of that neurochemistry that's happening. And that's what makes it not easy to stop because it's not actually about the drug, and you have to see the film to understand this better. But it's about the dopamine that that high creates. And so people aren't necessarily chasing the drug, they're trying to chase that dopamine high that makes you feel better temporarily until you don't. And then until it's full blown, until you think, oh my gosh, I can't stop. And so yeah, people would stop if they could, Chris. It's just that rewiring of the brain circuitry. And the cool thing about the brain is that you can rewire that circuitry. It can be healthy and get back to a normal circuitry of wiring, but that takes a lot of different things. So recovery is hard, and it is an arduous road. And I think what people don't know is that relapse is a very, very normal part of recovery. And some people will relapse multiple times until that's the last time, but you don't know when that last time is going to be. So as a loved one walking alongside someone, you have to be patient. You have to love them through that, encourage them to get back up and get back to the program, get back to your community of support. Very few people can do it alone, very few. And if you're looking for long-term sustainable recovery, you have to be part of a community that can support you in that.
So along those lines, what could the community here do to better support people?
Check on your neighbors. If you know a neighbor has a young person, or maybe there's a coworker, or, again, it doesn't discriminate age-wise, socioeconomic-wise, skin color-wise. This thing is a beast. And, call people, check on them, ask them how you can walk alongside of them. If they need an accountability partner, just one person. I'm not saying you have to go create a not-for-profit in this community. We have a lot of people in this community doing good work in this area. Centerstone is a huge blessing to this community. The Joys Do Something ministry is a huge blessing, and they're doing something. They're helping people find treatment. They're paying for people to get transported to treatment. There's just all kinds of ways you can donate and give, whether it's your time, talent, or treasure. Don't ignore it. If you know somebody who's hurting, or somebody whose family is hurting because of it, please reach out to them. And just showing them love and concern, a phone call a week, it's huge, and people will tell you that it's huge.
Well, it's so impactful and so simple and easy at the same time. Now, I want to move away from the films for a second to a book you wrote, because associated with all of this is a children's book called Avi's Hope. So tell us a little bit. How did you go? Okay, so you weren't a filmmaker. If I'm not mistaken, you weren't an author either. So you tackle the film, and then you say, okay, now I'm going to write a book. So why a book? What's it about? And even more so, why a children's book?
Well, I knew early on that there needed to be a children's book for all the littles. And my littles are, I consider, first grade through fifth grade, that are coming from challenging circumstances very early on. And so because of we talked about it early, how expensive making a film is, I knew I probably wouldn't do that for elementary kiddos. Our educational film is 6th grade on up. It's a PG-13 rating, because that's the rating I had to give it on PBS when the film went to PBS, and so, which we didn't talk about, but don't let me come back to that.
We're going to get on.
Yeah, and so one day, I'd just been carrying it around in my head and in my heart, and it took me a year to find the right illustrator, Lisa Illig, who's just incredibly talented, because I knew the illustrations were going to be as important as the text to this story, because it's not unicorns, it's not balloons, it's not, fairies. This is a tough subject. And so once I saw a sample drawing of Lisa's, I'm like, okay, she gets it, she got it. And when I was on an airplane and we were going abroad, and finally I thought, okay, this is the time. I'm just going to vomit it out on paper and see where I land. And, with a few tweaks, and listen, everybody, I'm not a writer. This is no Pulitzer Prize. But this tells and conveys a very important story, because many kiddos are coming from homes where parents are in active addiction still. And so Avi's an 8 or 9-year-old little girl navigating active addiction in the home with mom. Her dad is no longer there, and we don't say why, but he is the voice that she hears in the background, and I had 3 goals for Avi's Hope, and one is that she would have healthy coping strategies, and so she goes to her imaginary horses, Prince and Rizzo and others, and they sing and they dance and they play in her head when she's feeling such dread. And then Daddy is the corral keeper of the horses. So she's got all the beloved things, where she escapes to when she needs to kind of get a hold of her feelings. And the second goal, and this is so important for kids in these circumstances, is they have a trusted adult in their lives to talk to. Mm-hmm. I mean, really someone who's going to open an ear and open their heart to just letting these little people talk about their feelings. And so she, in this story, has her Nana and her teacher to talk to. So she's lucky. She has 2 trusted adults. And I know many teachers serve in that capacity for kids in our county, Chris. Mm-hmm. I know that to be true. And then thirdly, we want Avi to know that even at 8 or 9, she can start using her voice to empower her life for something different. And this is going to be the secret sauce. This is where this whole pandemic drug use issue is going to change. And that's with kids sitting in seats right now in our elementary school going, yeah, I saw that, and that's not what I want for my life. And so we want Avi to remember that she's creative, she's bright, she's fun, she has good friends, she has a support system around her Uncle Fred and her best friend Sam, whose hair is red. And, that's what we want for her. And that her life can be her own, and breaking generational use is critical to us healing as a nation.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about PBS, but also just where can people see this? So we got the law enforcement screening is here at the Playhouse on the 16th.
And it's free.
Free, okay. And what time is that one?
2:30 p.m.
2:30 p.m. So.
And then we're going to have a very vibrant Q&A afterwards.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to see it. But if you can't make it on that day, where are other places where people can come into contact with them?
Unfortunately, that's harder to do because I have to license the films because that's how I pay the bills. And that's how I pay for distribution and materials like you have. And so the best thing I can recommend for people is to go to pbs.org, type in cannot leave that word. Everybody wants to call it Addict's Wake, and it's the Addict's Wake. You have to type in that, and you can stream it on demand. And it's the 58-minute version of our original film, which was an hour and 48. Okay. But to fit PBS programming, I had to give that film a pretty significant haircut. But it's still impactful, and you can see a lot of the stories that are, in the first film. And that will be good through August of 26. I had a 3-year contract with PBS, and so that will expire in August, but you can go there, and that's the best place. If you are looking at licensing these films for something you want to do as a screening or host something, just email me and we can talk about how you can view it before you purchase the license and that kind of thing.
And I assume if for those films, we'll obviously put the PBS link down in the show notes. We'll also link to the website, which has kind of lays them all out. I think the trailers
all 4 trailers on there.
And so that's a great way to get more familiar with it as well. And then as far as Avi's Hope, the book, if I'm not mistaken, that's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, pretty much. If you're looking for a book, it should be there.
It is there. If you can also, it's on my website.
Okay.
So if you want to purchase it off my website, and the thing that's on my website that's not at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Archway Publishers, that's actually who published the book for me, is I have a lady in this community who is leading other ladies, and they're making little comfort care princes for me. So I have little ponies, and I take these to conferences where I go. I just got back from Wisconsin. My ponies get so much attention at a conference. It's mind-blowing. Everybody loves these little comfort care animals. And so you can also order the pony off of my website. That's the only place you can get it.
So we'll have a link to your website for the book and the ponies down below as well. But like I said, if for some reason you can't get there or you just want to go to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, that's an option as well. With all of that said, is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that we should?
I don't think so. Your questions have been very thorough.
Good.
Thank you.
Because I really want to dive in, because this is it's a hugely important topic, and it's something that I don't know that any of us really wake up in the morning and go, you know what, I want to talk about addiction today, or I want to think about this terrible thing going on in my community. but it's so important.
Yes.
And it's a problem that, yeah, it's pervasive and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's one that I feel like we could solve given
Yes.
enough time.
Given enough time. And we're, I will say this about Indiana, and I need to say this, the opioid settlement monies the state of Indiana gave me to do this law enforcement version. So that was such a relief that I didn't have to go raise yet more funding, because I'm exhausted from trying to raise funds to create and distribute these films. Want to help, let me know. But the state of Indiana is in one of the top 10 cities in our country, leading the way in recovery in terms of infrastructure. And I'm so proud of our state, because a lot of times we're late to the plate on a lot of issues, but on this one, we're leading the way in recovery infrastructure, and we've not stuck our neck in the sand and pretended that the state of Indiana does not also share in these issues. Every state in the nation, every county in the nation is plagued by declining mental health and substance use right now. And so we can change it, but it's going to take us, all of us, doing what little piece we can to really heal our communities. And I've had a federal senator and a state senator both tell me they're so glad that I have these community tools to help communities heal themselves, because big government's not going to do it. And right now, many treatment centers and programs and all, we're all experiencing the rescinding of funds that has been occurring. And so it's even more important for communities to get creative and strategic as how they're going to fight back.
Absolutely. Now, before I let you go, though,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions that are a little bit more fun, because I feel like we need to end, not to say end on a high note, but just 3 fun questions. What is one word that describes Brown County to you?
That's so hard. Eccentric.
I like that one. Because it really is kind of eccentric, right? I mean,
And
there's
I
so
love
many
it.
different things that go on.
I love it because it is.
Do you have a favorite local meal or treat?
I love our restaurants, all of them. My favorite treat, let me answer that, is ooey gooey cinnamon rolls.
Those are good.
They're so dangerous for me, and I can eat the whole thing and not even feel shamed about it. I'm high on sugar for the rest of the day, but I think they're amazing.
They really are.
Yeah.
And if you're visiting and you haven't tried one,
Yeah.
you really need to. If
Yeah.
you're local and you haven't tried one, I'm not sure what's going on.
A favorite meal, there's just so many great restaurants in Brown County. I mean, everywhere you go, you can get something that's absolutely wonderful and delicious. So we try to patronize all our restaurants because they're all so good.
They really are. And what, as final question, as you've been going across this journey, getting a lot of time spent in the county, getting to know people and covering heavy topics, but just being around. What has been the most rewarding part of the entire filmmaking journey for you?
I have a whole testimonial page, and when people say to me, they'll come up to me, or I had a woman pull up at a conference next to me and say, I want you to know my husband gave me his phone. I don't even know what that meant fully after we watched the film on PBS and said he was ready to receive help. The fact that the films are giving communities the opportunity to talk about it and to shine light on it, and then they're all in this community setting where they can start linking arms like, I've talked about. And I get testimonials, all the time that's happening, and that's my reward. And in this community, as I said, there were people already doing that here, and so my films are just serving the work that was already started in terms of healing, and I just love that it's helping in some small way. That's my reward.
I have a feeling it's helping in a little bit more than a small way, but it's wonderful what you're doing, and I really hope people that have the ability to come on the 16th can get out here and see the film, get more acquainted with the issue. Lisa, with that, thank you so much for being here. This has been a wonderful conversation, even if a heavier topic, but it's been wonderful to have this time to sit down and talk.
Thank you again, Chris. And again, I appreciate how you're showcasing the work and the businesses and the things that happen in this very eclectic, eccentric community of ours, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on In Brown County. If you liked today's episode, be sure to follow, leave a review, and share with someone who loves Brown County as much as you do. We'll see you next week, right here on the front porch.